Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Wi-Fi Streaming with Ben Miller. Whoops, got a little feedback going there. Test my login, make sure I'm able to communicate. Yes, I am. Excellent, excellent. So yeah, welcome back to another episode of Wi-Fi Streamin' with Ben Miller. As usual, I am kind of getting a couple of things ready here as we get started. Let me get this all set here so that we are ready to rock. Got a special treat today. I don't know if it's actually a something that you all would consider a major treat, but one of the things that I've been working on is writing a Wi-Fi course, and the idea with this Wi-Fi course is to try to kind of what is going on here now? Okay, there we go. The idea with this course is to try to, let me make sure this is showing for you all. Come on, there we go. Okay, yeah, looks like that's good. Yeah, so the idea for this course is to try to kind of fit into a place in the world of Wi-Fi training, where there may be a need of some sort. It's a common thing that you kind of see in the business world. Someone sees a place where there might be a need for something, and they try to fill it. Based on whatever, based on market research, based on instincts, based on whatever rationale. I mean, look, one of the most successful Wi-Fi industry stories over the last, let's say, 15 years has been the rise of Ekahau, the makers of site survey software. And Ekahau did not start off primarily as a company to make site survey software. Originally, the site survey software was a tool that was just designed to do location or to facilitate their location tracking system, the RTLS, the real-time location system, or locating service, whatever RTLS stands for. Ooh, you know what? Sorry, I forgot to send out the Twitter message here. In fact, I can do that on my phone, so I don't need to kind of disrupt the whole thing. There we go. But yeah, so the idea was that Ekahau had this system of little hardware tags that you could attach to various devices. It was something, at least to my knowledge, that primarily was just used in healthcare. I don't think Ekahau had many RTLS customers beyond the healthcare world. I could be wrong about that. It's not like I was working for Ekahau, just going by kind of what I saw out there back at that time. But yeah, so the idea was let's do a or from Ekahau's perspective. Let's see here. Streaming now. Join to watch Chapter 1. Sorry, I'm obviously not super professional to be doing this right now. But yeah, so the point is that Ekahau Site Survey originally designed is just something to kind of support their real-time location services, and whoops, there we go. But then over the years, Ekahau kind of saw that there was a real need amongst integrators and then kind of secondarily amongst Wi-Fi vendors to kind of do some planning, to do some design Wi-Fi networks before installing access points and controllers and everything of that nature. And so they, created Echo House Site Survey and added all these great features and such, and obviously it's become a big thing. A huge percentage now of new Wi-Fi installations, of existing Wi-Fi installations that get upgraded, are done with Echo House Site Survey being used somewhere along the line. And there's countless other examples of people sort of seeing some type of hole in an industry that could be filled. Apple with the iTunes service back when music was sold on CDs and people started pirating it over the internet. Apple kind of said, hey, we need a simple interface for selling music. Spotify with streaming music. Netflix with online video. Netflix didn't start up with the idea of we're going to stream a bunch of movies and TV shows over the internet. It started up back in 1997, back when the internet wasn't capable of doing that level of quality for video, and they just saw kind of holes in the industry at various points and tried to fill them. And so that's the idea with what I've been working on. The idea is to do some type of Wi-Fi training. I've taught a lot of Wi-Fi classes in my day. CWNA classes, vendor-specific classes, shorter classes, longer classes. So the idea there is to have a class where the target is sort of rank and file network engineers. So for someone who works as a network engineer at a hospital, a school district, a company that has offices in various places, whatever it is, the idea would be that a lot of those network engineers have to know routing, switching, some degree perhaps of WAN technologies, some cloud technologies, just a lot of different things that those folks need to know. One of the things that those folks need to know is Wi-Fi, is wireless. And so the idea there is a class that's kind of targeted for those folks. That the idea is that the class is trying to focus kind of on practical application of Wi-Fi, on areas of the technology that may not be as clear as kind of not maybe there's not as much knowledge out there already by the typical network engineer. And so that's the idea. And so I was trying to think of topics for this week's stream. It's always a little bit tricky because nowadays we aren't really allowed to leave the house, at least here in Los Angeles. I realize a lot of other places around the world are sort of having the local or the state or the federal government implement similar policies. But it's been 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks maybe, since Los Angeles was kind of put on shelter-in-place orders. The idea of stay in the house as much as possible, only go out for essential needs. So it's been admittedly a little bit tougher for me to come up with ideas for the old Twitch stream. I'm always happy to get ideas. There's a number of different ways you can get in touch with me. But hey, if you have any ideas for the Twitch stream, of course, you're here on my page. So feel free to put a little message in the chat area there. And I'm, always happy to kind of look at that. Also, you can reach me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @BenMiller. You can reach me via email. I also have a blog. I know I've been saying for weeks and weeks that I have a blog post that I'm almost finished with, but to kind of reveal a little bit about what's going on, one of the reasons why I haven't been as attentive to the blog is because I've been working on trying to write up this class. So what I thought, I was working on it a little bit over the weekend, in fact. And I kind of just thought to myself, like, I I probably should just do a chapter of the class. It's Twitch isn't necessarily a sort of a learning environment. It's designed to be maybe a little bit more of a fun environment, but I also always put these archives up on YouTube, and so that's the idea. Before we get started, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say hope everybody is staying healthy and safe. Hopefully everybody is doing okay. I know I'm sure some of you have friends, family, people who may work in healthcare, who may work in food service, who may work in distribution, who may work as delivery drivers, things like that. Definitely a huge thank you to all of those folks for sort of keeping society functioning to the extent it is. I know, kind of a regular place that I go for supplies and groceries and such is Target. There's a Target here in Los Angeles, relatively close to my home, and it's I definitely kind of feel for the workers there. No doubt about it. Definitely kind of always a line at checkout. Everybody who's on the floor is always getting bombarded with, when are you going to get restocked with this? Tons of shelves with that by the end of the day, if you go later in the day, all the olive oil is sold, all the pasta is sold, just tough to keep stuff in stock. So, if you know one of those folks, or perhaps are one of those folks, definitely a big thank you to all, no doubt about it. Who knows? Maybe if you work as a network admin, as a network engineer, or if you work as a integrator or as a vendor who supports those folks, who knows? Maybe something in here will be useful to you. Just a quick little warning. Look, before I get started, I realize I'm already almost 15 minutes in, so I ought to get on with it. But for some of the folks that are kind of veterans of the stream, that have watched it for a little while, that I sometimes go into a little bit more of a hardcore topic, get really in depth into how the standards work, the little what the different bits and messages inside packets mean, really kind of drilling down deep. Today is not going to go that deep. I'm not going to even open Wireshark or anything like that. There still might be some information that may be useful. I always try to add a little bit of depth to any type of class I teach or project I work on, just because I'm a big believer that understanding the fundamental nature of something is very helpful for using it, for getting the most out of whatever it is you're working with. If you're a mechanic, I feel like if you understand how the car works and how all the pieces fit together, it typically makes the person a better mechanic. And so I do try to add at least a little bit of depth, but this class is not designed as like a super hardcore class, so today's not going to have as much hardcore kind of in-depth information. So with that, let's get into it. And look, I always try to add a little bit of kind of show and tell, share Wireshark with you all, share Wi-Fi Explorer with you all, share what's, on my iPhone with you all. I'm probably going to do a little bit of that, but at least my design for this course would be that it would have two separate parts. So one way that people could consume the course is by watching the videos, which kind of would look similar to what you're going to see here. Me talking along with PowerPoints and me illustrating on those PowerPoints. And then another part of the course would be kind of following along with hands-on exercises. So someone who, is more into the hands-on side of things might potentially want to get both parts of the course, learn about the topic and then do the hands-on. Someone who is, who's more just, interested in learning the information for their job, but less interested in doing exercises on a tool like Wi-Fi Explorer or a tool like Wireshark or some of the Android tools or Apple iOS tools or Windows tools that you might use for Wi-Fi, someone like that might only consume half the course, might only consume what you might call the lecture part of the course. So that's at least the idea for the course. So yeah, thank you in advance for indulging me. Again, next week I'm going to try to get it back to normal and do a stream on an actual relevant topic. But I wanted to throw this out there, kind of get some feedback. It is still a rough draft, so things may change in terms of how the course looks. I don't have very many fancy looking graphics on these slides or anything like that. A lot of them are relatively basic, but yeah. So hope y'all enjoy. Okay, without any further ado, you might be able to tell I'm a little bit nervous about it. Anytime I roll something out to the public for the first time, always a little bit of nervousness. But yeah, let's take a look at it. So the idea would be that this would be chapter 1 of a course. Let's say it would probably be maybe a total of, I don't know, 10 hours, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit less than 10 hours worth of training. Could be closer to the, closer to maybe the 6 to 8 hour mark, but somewhere around 10 hours at least was my initial thought of pre-recorded training that you can watch anytime, anywhere to learn about various topics that might be relevant to an admin. And we'll see, if I'm able to get this done soon enough, I may be able to get it published and get it out there. And the idea is, since this is pre-recorded training, this would be very, very low cost. This would be definitely less than $50 per head. Probably a lot less than $50 per head. I'd have to, kind of confirm with the folks I've been chatting with about trying to find a distribution channel for it to figure that out. But the idea is definitely not to make this kind of a traditionally priced Wi-Fi training. It's definitely, the idea is to make it a lot less expensive. Okay, so let's look at it. So I'm going to essentially pretend that, you all would be a class, and for those of you that are watching along live, certainly if you do want to send a message or something like that, starting now, let me just make sure that I am in fact logged in correctly and everything. Okay, good. It showed up in the chat area. So yeah, for those of you that may be watching live, feel free to post a message live. For those of you that may be watching a recording, then you're just going to get the recording. So yeah, so welcome to chapter number 1. In chapter number 1, again, in this course, the idea is to kind of cover the essential aspects of Wi-Fi that a typical network engineer might want to know or might need to know. And I always like to start off by just talking about the basic infrastructure. Just understanding kind of the basic infrastructure of how these little wireless client devices get their way to your local area network. And of course, for many client devices, the goal is more so to get them out to the internet. But the reason why I focus on the local area network is that Wi-Fi is the technology that we are talking about today, or that I am talking about today. And Wi-Fi is designed as a LAN technology, is designed as a local area network technology. So let's get into a couple of details about it. I always like to start by just talking about some of the basics of the wireless link. And the two basics that I always like to focus on right away are that anytime you have your wireless client device communicating with a wireless access point, two big things to keep in mind are that Wi-Fi is a two-way communication technology. And in Wi-Fi, your channel is a frequency. So those are kind of just two things to keep in mind anytime you see one of these types of devices connected to a Wi-Fi network, whether it's designing, whether it's troubleshooting, whatever it is. It's a two-way communication. the channel is a frequency. So a couple little details about those. When it comes to two-way communication, the big reason why I always like to start by focusing on the fact that Wi-Fi is a two-way communication is just, hopefully plant the bug in people's heads that having a successful Wi-Fi connection and communication is about more than just basic coverage from the access point. If you're able to get a strong signal from whatever Wi-Fi network you're connecting to, fantastic. But sometimes a strong signal is not necessarily a guarantee of strong performance. Your strong signal may allow the wireless access point to successfully send data to the client device, but that's no guarantee that the wireless client device can send data back to the access point. Also, the reverse is something to be aware of. Just because of the fact that the client device can send data to the wireless access point does not necessarily mean you'll have a successful wireless link. The access point has to be able to send data to the client. In the world of Wi-Fi, there are a number of different ways to kind of check signal strength. That's kind of where this comes from, the idea that you want to make sure you have a good two-way communication. Sometimes the issue is that you see a strong signal strength on one side or another, and that can kind of make you think that you have a good signal. When it comes to seeing the signal strength, good to keep in mind that the signal strength is commonly called RSSI. So if you see the term RSSI, that is the strength of the signal. Another little thing to note is that when you see an RSSI level, you are typically seeing a received RSSI level. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say I have a MIST wireless LAN infrastructure. MIST is an enterprise vendor that sells wireless access points. They're a competitor, at least in the Wi-Fi space, to MIST is owned by Juniper, so I suppose Juniper would be the competitor, but they're a competitor to Cisco and HPE, Aruba, and other vendors that sell enterprise-grade access points. But just to use one example, if I'm looking at my MIST interface, at my MIST management console, and I see an RSSI, that is the received signal strength, meaning that is the signal strength for data that is coming from a client and being sent to the access point. And then conversely, if I see an RSSI on a client device, if I look on my iPhone, if I look on my laptop, whatever it is, that's going to be a signal strength coming in the other direction. That's going to be the received, again, it's always received, signal strength coming from the access point. Just to real quickly flip over to my computer interface to show you the example of the Mac operating system here. There you see the Mac operating system, and if I go up to, sorry, have a little issue there, so hopefully this would not be part of the recording. Just had a little issue here on the old computer that I'm working on. There we go. Now I'm in the right place. So yeah, if I whoops, there we go. Okay, now I'm seeing it. Or maybe I'm getting more lag than I thought. There we go. Okay. So yeah, if I on a Mac device, if I go up to the top of the screen, I can go to my Wi-Fi settings. If I hold down the Alt key or Option key, watch what happens. I see a little bit different information, and one of the things I see down here, hopefully you can see it fairly clearly, is my RSSI, is my signal strength. So the key thing to note there is when I see that RSSI, when I see that little negative 45 dBm or negative 47 dBm, that is only a one-way signal strength. That does not necessarily guarantee that I have a really good, solid wireless link. It's just telling me that I have a good one-way wireless link. And later on in the class, I'll get into what does dBm mean, why are we seeing negative numbers rather than positive numbers. But, you know, I assume everybody's kind of familiar with how negative and positive integers work. Negative 46 would be a higher level than, say, negative 56. Even though 56 is a larger integer, because these are negative numbers, negative 46 would be the higher number. So yeah, so that's one thing to note about the wireless link. Just keep in mind it's a two-way communication. So when you look at signal strength or when you go through different Wi-Fi settings, just good to kind of keep that in mind, that the signal has to go both ways. The other little thing to be aware of is that our Wi-Fi channel is a frequency. First, one key thing to note, when I say channel, what I am talking about with channel is essentially what folks in the networking world might refer to as the collision domain. When I say the word channel, what I'm referring to is a physical medium over which one communication at a time can occur. That's how I'm defining the word channel. So in the wired networking world, that's kind of the definition of a collision domain. A physical medium. In the wired networking world, that might be your switch port. Switch port is a little physical medium over which one communication at a time can occur. In the wireless world, at least in the Wi-Fi world, I guess, there's lots of different types of wireless communication that are a little bit different from Wi-Fi. For example, I remember reading this paper years and years ago talking about how visual communication, sight, is a wireless communication method. It's like there's no wire going between my eyes and the camera that I'm looking at right now on my computer. So me being able to see that camera would be a wireless channel. In visual communication, the channel would be your line of sight. If I, put my hand up in between my line of sight, between my eyes and the camera that I'm looking at, then I no longer can see the camera. I can only have one thing I'm seeing in any given visual line of sight. Just to give you one example of how wireless communication channels can work. In the world of Wi-Fi, a channel is a frequency. If you have two or more Wi-Fi devices transmitting over the same frequency at the same time in the same place, there will be some type of collision. The transmissions will be very unlikely to be successful. It'll be very unlikely that if you have, say, two wireless access points both transmitting at the exact same time over the exact same frequency, it'll be relatively unlikely that the client devices that are trying to receive communication from those two access points will be able to successfully receive that communication. The idea is, though, if you have two different Wi-Fi devices using different frequencies, even if those two Wi-Fi devices are in the same place at the same time, both transmitting, those two different Wi-Fi devices on different frequencies will be able to both have successful communications. The reason why is they're on different channels, just like if two things are in a different line of sight. If I put my hand up to block the little light that I have to kind of illuminate me as I'm recording this, as I'm doing the Twitch stream, if I put my hand up to block the light, that hand is on the channel, is on the line of sight between my eyeballs and the light. That hand is not blocking the line of sight between the camera and my face. You can still see my face even if my hand blocks the line of sight between between my eyes and the light. If I block the line of sight between my eyes and the camera, then you can no longer see my eyes. So again, the idea there is just in the Wi-Fi. So any type of communication always is going to have a channel, always is going to have a physical medium over which one communication at a time can occur. In Wi-Fi, the channel is frequency. And then just to give a few details on frequency, frequency is the number of wave cycles per second. When we have a little client device here, let's say that's my iPhone, when we have a access point here that the client device is going to communicate with, when the client device or when the access point transmit wireless data between one another, they transmit over a given frequency. And what that frequency is determined by is the number of little radio wave cycles per second. Sometimes cycles are called radio wave periods. So sometimes a period is the term used to denote sort of one complete revolution, one complete cycle that kind of starts over again. So if you see the term period out there, that's kind of the same thing, or at least in a radio frequency sense, that's the same thing as what I'm calling a wave cycle. But yeah, that's what a frequency is just the number of wave cycles per second, and the number of wave cycles per second is measured in hertz, which is shortened to Hz. Hertz is Hertz, shortened to Hz. So again, some basics about the wireless link. It's a two-way communication method, so you got to make sure that the access point can communicate with the client. You also got to make sure the client can communicate back with the access point. And then the channel for wireless communication, at least for Wi-Fi communication, is a frequency, is the number of wave cycles per second. So for example, when I say that I'm using channel number 44, channel number 44 just means some frequency. To be honest with you, I forget exactly which frequency it is off the top of my head. I believe it's somewhere around 5,300 megahertz. So to kind of decode what that means there, that's 5,300 mega cycles per second. Mega is million. The mega prefix in the metric system is million. So this would be 5,300 million wave cycles per second. Another way to denote that would be 5.3 gigahertz. Giga is billion. So you could say 5,300 megahertz, 5.3 gigahertz. And I'm sure I'm a little bit off on those numbers. To be honest with you, I haven't memorized exactly which frequencies are used by channel number 44 in Wi-Fi. But that's just one example. And again, if you have two simultaneous communications on different frequencies, then you won't have interference, or at least you shouldn't have significant interference. If you have two or more communications simultaneously on the same frequencies in the same location, then you are likely to have interference. So that's just something to kind of start with, something to understand the basics about when it comes to understanding the Wi-Fi infrastructure. Let's get into a few more basics here. The Wi-Fi standard is IEEE 802.11. IEEE stands for Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. You can get more information about the IEEE at IEEE.org. One of the many things that the IEEE does is it creates networking standards. All IEEE networking standards use 802 because the first IEEE networking standard was created in February of 1980. Created in the second month of 1980, so 802 is what's given to all IEEE networking standards. When you see a little dot after an IEEE networking standard, that is meant to kind of, the numbers or the letters after the dot are meant to kind of delineate between the different types of standards. Dot 802, dot 11, I should say, is wireless LAN. is a wireless extension of a local area network. Now, that's not to say that you can't use wireless LAN technologies for other purposes. You could have a wireless LAN technology, but kind of use it for a peer-to-peer wireless link. You could have a wireless LAN technology, but use it really for internet access, not so much for local network access. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use 802.11 devices for LAN access only. It just means that 802.11 standard is designed for LANs. It could be used for other things, but it was designed and remains designed for LAN access. Another thing that I probably should add here is another organization that is kind of relevant to the wireless LAN world is the Wi-Fi Alliance. Wi-Fi Alliance, you can get more information about that at y-fi.org. And over the years, the Wi-Fi Alliance has increasingly sort of created their own standards, their own technologies to supplement the IEEE 802.11 family of standards. So that's a kind of another organization to be aware of. You know, the original idea with the Wi-Fi Alliance was that the Wi-Fi Alliance would just certify devices. It would be like if, let's say, Samsung made a smartphone. Samsung would make a smartphone complying with an 802.11 standard, and then Samsung would submit that smartphone to the Wi-Fi Alliance, and the Wi-Fi Alliance would test to see whether that smartphone complied with the 802.11 standard. That was sort of the original idea with the Wi-Fi Alliance. Over the years, the Wi-Fi Alliance has been around for like 20 years. Over the years, the Wi-Fi Alliance does a little bit more when it comes to creating new technologies, new standards, etc. Okay. One little thing to note here about the fact that this is a wireless LAN technology, that Wi-Fi is a wireless LAN technology, is that it does have some of the pros and cons of a LAN, of a local area network. One of the pros of a LAN is LANs, local area networks, are designed to be technologies that anyone can use. And so that typically keeps deployment costs down compared to some other wireless technologies. Because of the fact that anyone can use a LAN technology, the cost of the little radios for wireless LAN devices, the cost of the base stations, of the access points for wireless LAN devices, the cost of frequency space, of channel space to be able to have wireless LAN communications, all those costs tend to be a little bit on the lower side compared to technologies that are not as open, compared to technologies like 5G, for example. With 5G, the radios tend to be a little bit more expensive. The base stations that are mounted on light poles or mounted on cellular towers, wherever they're mounted, those tend to be a little bit more expensive than Wi-Fi access points. And then there's a great expense in 5G with acquiring frequencies, with acquiring channels that will be used for the 5G communication, the communication between smartphones and base stations, or whatever other 5G device, laptops and base stations, or cars and base stations, anything that is going to use 5G. So the positive of this being a LAN technology, of Wi-Fi being a LAN technology, is that it's open and thus it tends to keep the cost down. However, the downside of Wi-Fi being an open technology is we don't own the channels. If my Wi-Fi network is on channel number 44, there's nothing that I can do to prevent other people in my area from using my same frequencies, from using channel 44 and potentially interfering with my network. Wi-Fi, because it's a LAN technology, because it's an open technology, because anyone can own a LAN, Wi-Fi uses what we call unlicensed channels. An unlicensed channel is a channel you don't have to pay for. cellular providers, at least here in the United States, pay billions and billions of dollars for the right to use certain channels, for the right to use certain frequencies. But so the positive is with Wi-Fi, we don't have to pay billions and billions of dollars to be able to set up our network legally. But the downside is we don't own our channel. So just something to keep in mind. There's nothing, at least in the legal realm, that would prevent someone from setting up a Wi-Fi network that could potentially interfere with yours, or potentially having your own Wi-Fi network interfere with itself. So just something to be aware of when it comes to those channels, those frequencies that I was talking about earlier. Wi-Fi uses unlicensed channels. As far as the specific channels that Wi-Fi uses, we are going to get into more detail in that in future chapters. But for now, just a quick preview. The original set of channels that Wi-Fi used was the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. Those would include channels numbered 1 to 14. So if you see a Wi-Fi device connected to a channel that's between numbers 1 and 14, that means that device is using the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. 2.4 gigahertz, I kind of talked about that earlier on, would mean 2.4 billion cycles per second. So 2.4 gigahertz, the giga means billion, the hertz means wave cycles per second. So one of these little wave cycles, full wave cycle, before you kind of get to the next wave, one of those little wave cycles would be happening 2.4 billion times per second with the 2.4 gigahertz band. Another band that's very popular in Wi-Fi, in fact, the most popular Wi-Fi band today, is 5 gigahertz. That would be channels numbered 36 to 165. And then a future set of channels is 6 gigahertz. To be honest with you, I don't know the channel numbers of 6 gigahertz. That's something I need to look up before I were to actually publish this course. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail, a wise basketball coach once said. So there we go. That's something that I need to prepare for before I start in the course, is knowing which channels 6 gigahertz are. Also I mentioned some of the other wireless technologies that are out there. Just a quick note about some of them that you may have seen, may have heard of. One thing I do always like to kind of point out here, though, satellite communications, broadcast television, terrestrial radio stations, those are all technologies that are using wireless communication. They have the little radio waves going through the air. Those radio waves are at different frequencies. They're on different channels than what Wi-Fi is using, but they're still going through the air. But here's a key thing to note about those technologies that I have listed as broadcast. Those are one-way technologies. If you're a subscriber to Dish Network for satellite television, your Dish Network satellite and your Dish Network receiver does not do any communication up into space. It's a one-way communication. The satellite that Dish Network sent out into space is sending to your satellite dish that's on your roof, to your dish box that you have in your whatever living room or wherever you watch TV. But that communication is not two-way. The other technologies listed on here are two-way. Wireless broadband, wireless personal area networks, Wi-Fi we talked about earlier on. Another two-way technology would be microwave links, site-to-site links. Those are all two-way communication. But broadcast communication, terrestrial radio, over-the-air broadcast television or satellite television, any kind of other satellite communication, those are all broadcast technologies. Then we have some little comparisons for you. This is mainly a page that I created for folks that might want to pause the presentation at this point, just to kind of look at some comparisons between Wi-Fi and wireless broadband, Wi-Fi and microwave links, etc., to kind of understand some of those similarities and differences. Now, I want to kind of move on in this first chapter here to talk about some technical details, some terminology that we use in the Wi-Fi world. I want to, for the rest of the chapter, talk a little bit about the basic service set and the extended service set. I would say that those are two things that are sort of essentials to really understand, to really know about if you're gonna successfully manage, successfully deploy, successfully troubleshoot a Wi-Fi network. The basic service set is designed to be one access point and all the clients that are connected to it. The extended service set is designed to be one network, or sometimes called one SSID, and all of the access points that use that network, all of the client devices that use that network. So the basic service set is just one access point. The extended service set is one network, is one SSID. And I have some additional details about those. You know, it gets a little bit more complicated than that, than just the basic service set is one access point. The extended service set is one network, is one SSID. I want to go through some details here. You know, with modern wireless access points, one access point will typically support multiple basic service sets. So I may have one physical access point, but I may have a basic service set for guest Wi-Fi, a basic service set for internal Wi-Fi. Maybe I'll have a third basic service set for certain vendors that I want to give privileges beyond the guest network, but I don't want to give them the full privileges of the internal network. There can be multiple basic service sets from one physical access point. And sort of the way that works is that the access point's little radios, the little radio inside the access point that's creating the radio waves to transmit, that's demodulating the radio waves that get received, that's making it so the radio waves that the access point hears get turned into data, make it so the client devices can kind of understand, or make it so the network can understand the data that radio waves are representing. The idea there is that little radio inside the access point will send out messages, will send out little Wi-Fi frames, little Wi-Fi packets. The access point radio will send out these messages using multiple MAC addresses. You know, for those of you that might have a little bit more of a networking background, a lot of times the natural idea one has is that the MAC address is kind of a hard-coded physical address, that the physical NIC, the physical network interface of a computer, of a switch, of a router, of whatever device it is going to have this physical MAC address, this address that is assigned to that one device, and this address that can never be changed, that's kind of hard coded, that's hard set. That's kind of the idea there with the MAC address. So the access points radio can have multiple of these MAC addresses for talking to these multiple networks that the access point supports. So I can have one physical access point, my little one physical access point here, and that one physical access point may broadcast out with multiple different MAC addresses. It may have a MAC address of, 001122, 4156 E7. And maybe that MAC address will be the MAC address that's used when the access point is transmitting or receiving data for the guest network. But there may be another MAC address that the access point uses that's the exact same thing, except for it uses E8 in its last octet. And that may be the MAC address that the access point uses when it's sending or receiving data to devices that are on the internal network. So even though it's one physical access point, even though it's one physical radio that's inside the access point, transmitting the little packets to client devices, receiving the little packets of data from client devices, even though it's one physical radio or one physical access point, that one little radio inside that access point, with today's access points, is going to be able to use multiple MAC addresses, use multiple BSSIDs. And that's something I guess that I kind of glossed over there a little bit. The BSSID, or Basic Service Set Identifier, is an access point's wireless MAC address. And the BSSID is used by access points, or can be used by access points, to kind of delineate between different networks. If the access point supports a guest network, an internal network, a vendor network, the access point can use 3 different BSSIDs to differentiate between those 3 different networks. Another thing to note about basic service sets, many access points today are multi-radio. In fact, just about all access points today are multi-radio. Excuse me. And if an access point is multi-radio, typically each radio is going to have its own unique set of BSSIDs, its own unique set of MAC addresses. That's kind of the idea with these res. And, for those of you that are following along here on Twitch or maybe watching the archive on YouTube, I definitely messed up this particular part of chapter number 1. I needed to go in immediately to talk about the fact that a BSS is identified by the BSSID, and that the BSSID is the access point's wireless MAC address, and then talk about the fact that a single access point radio can have multiple BSSIDs to differentiate between different networks. So that's a good note for yours truly for when I do the final draft of this class, that got to make sure that I focus on the BSSID right away there, rather than going into the whole thing about multiple networks. But for those of you that are watching the stream that that may not be familiar with this whole thing of how access points work, again, your access point may have one or more radios. Each radio is going to have its own set of BSSIDs, its own set of MAC addresses. And then also, if your access points support multiple networks, multiple SSIDs, that's what a network name is an SSID. If your access point supports multiple networks, each of those networks will also have its own unique MAC address, its own unique BSSID. So, for example here, if I have a typical enterprise class access point, I would have a dual radio access point. Most enterprise class access points nowadays are dual radio. They will have a 2.4 gigahertz and a 5 gigahertz radio. In a typical enterprise, I'm going to have at least 3 networks. I'm going to have, let's say 3 SSIDs, 3 networks, probably an internal network, probably a guest network, and probably some type of third network. For example, when I was working at USC, we had the Edu-Roam network as a third network, because USC was a partner, or is a partner, in the Edu-Roam project to allow people from different universities to seamlessly connect to Wi-Fi when they go to other campuses. So if a USC student or researcher or faculty member or staff member were to drive across town to the UCLA campus, to the University of California, Los Angeles public school campus. USC is a private school, University of Southern California. It's a private school. So if someone were to drive across town here in Los Angeles from the USC campus and go to the UCLA campus, the USC student or faculty member or researcher or staff member, whoever it is, would be able to seamlessly connect to UCLA's EduRoam network. And then vice versa. UCLA EduRoam people would be able to connect to USC's EduRoam network. So in any case there, the point is that for an access point that's dual radio and an access point that has 3 SSIDs, 3 different networks that it's supporting, typically that would mean 6 BSSIDs. That each access point would support 6 basic service sets, because each of the 2 radios would have 3 MAC addresses. Each of the 2 radios would have 3 different MAC addresses for the internal, the guest, and the EduRoam network that USC is using. So just to take that example here. One other little thing that I always like to touch on when talking about the basic service set and going through it, just a couple of little notes here about the access point and about client devices, because that's what makes up a basic service set, right, is access points and client devices. When it comes to the access point is the device that is going to extend LAN access wirelessly. So the idea is your local area network has all of this data going across it. It's using Ethernet technology for the data communication. You know, there's a little 802.3 header. There's a little Ethernet header on the front of every little piece of data, every little packet of data that's going across your local area network, that's going between your switches, your routers, and anything else that's connected to the wired local area network. The job of the access point is to allow wireless devices that do not have a wired network connection, to allow wireless devices to access this local area network. And so part of what that means is the access point is going to do this little conversion between Ethernet and Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi uses an 802.11 header instead of an 802.3 header on its data. And so your access point is going to be doing this constant conversion of data coming from the LAN, that's Ethernet, that's 802.3, converting that data into Wi-Fi data that uses 802.11 so that that data can be sent and received with a wireless client device. And then vice versa, 802.11 Wi-Fi data converted into 802.3 Ethernet data. I do want to point out that this conversion doesn't always happen at the physical access point. Some enterprise access point vendors use what we call controllers to do the conversion between 802.3 and 802.11. So, you know, just to quickly draw up kind of the way that would look, I have my little client device here. My client device has a wireless connection with my access point. My access point is managed by a controller, and then I have the rest of my local area network, routers, switches, whatever that is. In many cases, if you use a controller, your data is 802.11. It's Wi-Fi data between the client and the access point, which it has to be. But then your 802.11 data is kept intact and wrapped in an 802.3 header between the access point and the controller. And then it is the controller that does this conversion from 802.11 to 802.3. So there are different places where this conversion can happen, where the Wi-Fi client's data can kind of be converted from wireless to wired or wired back to wireless. But the point is that at least the initial design of the Wi-Fi standard, of the 802.11 standard, is that the access point, the device that kind of creates the basic service set, is the device that extends LAN access wirelessly. It's the device that does that conversion from Ethernet to Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi back to Ethernet. That's kind of the goal of the access point. Also, a couple little notes here about client devices. Since we're talking about the basic service set, that's the other part of the basic service set. There's the access point, but then there's also Wi-Fi clients. Obviously, I'm guessing everybody's aware, many different form factors. But the key reason why I wanted to, add this in the first chapter, just be aware that behavior can really vary dramatically between different client devices. That's the key thing. And we'll definitely get into more about that later on in the class. In future chapters, I'll talk more about some of the detailed ways that Wi-Fi client devices may be different. But on this page, we just have, 3 examples there of how Wi-Fi devices can be different from one another. You may have connections that prioritize signal strength. You may have clients that prioritize other things besides signal strength. You may have client devices that use lower speeds when the connection's not as stable or lower speeds when the connection's not as strong to try to make the connection more stable. You may have client devices that don't really lower their speeds as aggressively and thus just lose the connection entirely when the connection is not as strong, when the signal's not as strong. You may have clients that roam more aggressively between access points. You may have clients that are more sticky with their access points. So lots and lots of variations in client behavior. And again, that's going to be a big, important topic that we talk about later. I think, understanding a little bit about client behavior is a big area where, a lot of folks who are network engineers, kind of look for that information. A lot of folks who are network engineers may have dealt with those issues where you set up a Wi-Fi network somewhere, you test out the Wi-Fi network tests well, high throughput, large number of clients can connect, et cetera, et cetera. And then at some point in the future, you get complaints about that area. People say, hey, the Wi-Fi in this room or this hallway or this space doesn't work very well, even though that area was tested and came back with good tests. A major reason why that can happen is the variations between different client device behaviors. And so understanding a little bit about what those variations can be, how to look for those variations, how to test for those variations, that's an important part about being a network engineer, at least certainly in my view. I think it's something that can be helpful for a lot of network engineers. And so we're going to talk about that in a future chapter. To head towards the end of this chapter, the last little topic we're talking about is the Extended Service Set, or ESS. The Extended Service Set, or ESS, is just an SSID. That's all this is just an SSID, which, good thing this is a rough draft because I don't see the term SSID anywhere on this page. Nice. I know what happened here. I copied and pasted the BSS bullet points, and I never did replace them with the ESS bullet points. So my apologies there. So it's a good thing this is a rough draft here. But what I meant to say here on the page about ESS is that ESS is just one SSID. So a given ESS or given extended service set is just all access points, all client devices that are given that are using a given using a given SSID. The purpose of the SSID is to allow for roaming, to make it so that if you have a number of different access points, that if all of these access points are using the same ESS, if they're all using the SSID of Ben, let's say, then a client device that is configured for the SSID of Ben will be able to move through the area that these access points are covering and be able to roam seamlessly, be able to stay connected to network resources or stay connected to the internet, even as its wireless connection kind of changes and breaks. Even as this device kind of says, okay, I'm making a new connection, I'm breaking the old connection, I'm making a new connection, I'm breaking the old connection. Even as that's happening, the user of the client device won't realize it's happening. That's the idea with the extended service set. Another little thing that I wanted to add to this slide is an extended service set is also dependent on security as well as other, I guess you would call it, technologies. So what I mean by that is a wireless client device is not going to be able to roam. It's not going to be able to use the signature feature of an extended service set if the security configuration on two access points is different. So even if I have Ben as the SSID for one access point, Ben as the SSID for the second, Ben as the SSID for the third, if the security configuration is different between any of those access points, the client device will not be able to seamlessly stay connected within the extended service set. And there may be other technologies as well. That's something that may vary between client devices, but for example, if you have one access point that is using quality of service and another access point that is not using quality of service, it's possible that the client device will not roam seamlessly the way the extended service set was designed, the way the extended service set was intended. So that's the idea of the extended service set. It's just everything that's using the same SSID. It's something that is designed for roaming. It's something that's designed to make it so that client devices can stay connected as they are moving around a given area. And it's something that is definitely dependent on security, may be dependent on other technologies. Okay. And the last little thing we note here is just kind of the mechanics of how this works. The user is going to choose the SSID, and then the client device will choose the BSS as long as the BSS is using the SSID that the user chose. So I configure my device to use the Ben SSID. My device then will choose an access point to connect to. You know, there might be multiple access points around here. My client device will choose an access point as long as that access point is also using the Ben SSID. That's kind of the idea there. And that is chapter 1. So that's kind of the just a basic overview on the Wi-Fi infrastructure, some basics on the wireless link, some basics on wireless access points, on wireless client devices, on what the wireless channel is. Just kind of some basics to start with about Wi-Fi connections and how that works. And for a lot of folks, it may be a refresher, especially for those of you watching on Twitch or watching on YouTube. If you've been around the Wi-Fi business for a while, which I'm guessing many of you have, a lot of what I talked about here may be a refresher. Maybe all of it was a refresher. But at least the idea there is to have that be the first chapter of a potential course. And then the idea is go through the standards. Go through some radio frequency fundamentals. Go through a little bit about how communication between client devices and access points work in terms of the data rates and in terms of how modulation and demodulation works and whether it's successful, whether it's unsuccessful. Talk a little bit about the sharing of the channel, how that sharing happens, how the whole arbitration and CSMA, CA protocols are supposed to work, the different alternatives of how they work, how they can get messed up a little bit. Talk a little bit about kind of a little bit more depth about the client connection, how, what the different parameters are that client devices may be using to choose a network, and go through some basics of security, what the different security standards mean. Go into a little bit about radius. I find that radius sometimes is a topic that network engineers may not be totally familiar with. So even though radius can be used beyond Wi-Fi, radius is something that's maybe a little bit more common in Wi-Fi than it is with wired network connections. And so the idea is to have a chapter where we go through security and talk a little bit about radius, a little bit as well about design and about troubleshooting, heat mapping, things of that nature, and sort of not necessarily like instructions of here's how to do it, here's what the best practices are, but just more so the fundamentals of how things work. Meaning, if you do a heat map and you use, a certain device, being aware that the signals that you're seeing may not match up with what other devices are going to see. Or if you use a Wi-Fi Explorer type tool, a scanner type tool, here's what you are able to see, here's what you're not able to see. If you want to see more, here's, what a protocol analyzer will allow you to see, will not allow you to see. If you want to use a spectrum analyzer, here's what it'll allow you to see, what it'll not allow you to see. So that's the idea of the course, is to just more so kind of set up the essentials rather than, giving kind of advice on here's what we recommend, here's some tips for how to use it. The idea is learn the technology or learn the tool first, and then, Devin Aiken, for example, already has a great AWA certification and a great AWA course. Accredited wireless adjuster is what AWA stands for. He already has that for kind of, here are some examples of how you use the product, some tips for how to use the product. The idea is that then you could go into that course and learn that. Or if you take an Ekahau course, an ECSE course, you can go into that course and learn how to use Ekahau, hopefully having, or go into, Aruba training, where you learn how, to use Aruba controllers and what the different options are, having already known a little bit about kind of the basics of how Wi-Fi works. That's kind of the idea for this course. Definitely appreciate feedback if you all have it. If you have things that you liked, things that you didn't like, things that you'd recommend. Definitely appreciative if you want to give me feedback on those. I'll bring back the contact information. For those of you that are sort of the loyal viewers of the Twitch stream, thank you for tolerating this, I guess. I'm sure for a lot of you, all of the information I went through is mostly a review, and, you may not have, gotten as much new out of the stuff that I was talking about today, maybe compared to some of the stuff, the Twitch streams I've done when I've gone into a lot more technical detail. So I'll get back to the normal Twitch streams next week, get into more technical detail. And I know I say this every week, but at least my plan, again, last week it didn't happen, but my plan always is to do that second Twitch stream Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time. So that would be, trying to remember the exact time zone difference. I think that would be 11 p.m. in the UK, 1 a.m. in Finland. But yeah, so keep an eye out on Friday. I always try to post on my Twitter feed whenever I'm going on Twitch. So you can follow me, Ben Miller, on Twitter. If you haven't already, please do subscribe or follow on Twitch here. Definitely. I still need to get a few more followers before I can open up some additional features of Twitch. So if you don't subscribe already, it's definitely appreciated. And if you just would rather contact me directly, you can always send me an email, ben_miller@icloud.com. Again, yeah, thanks for being my guinea pigs, so to speak, with this. Maybe you got something useful out of it as well. So for those of you that did get something useful out of it, that's great. Happy to help with that. Now now maybe you know what I've been working on, and what I'm still working on is going through this class, and or going through writing this class to try to get it written, get it recorded, and make it available as kind of a low cost computer based sort of almost like a prereq. I don't want to say prerequisite because I don't want to act like it should be required, but something like a precursor. How about that? A precursor to doing other types of training, or a precursor to just doing work as a network engineer who has to manage a wireless network. All right. Until I see you again, hopefully Friday, maybe next week. But no matter what, 10 a.m. Pacific time, I will be here on next Wednesday. Have a good one, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.